Why should we read great books? What is the value of literature in our day and age? Is there anything that great books and literature can teach us about life? This, of course, is the pressing concern for all of us who are engaged in the education and defense of the humanities. In a world that doesn't seem to value the art of reading and dialoguing with literature and to be receptive to the wisdom of culture, we are tasked with offering reasons why great books, great art, and great literature still matter. Matthew Arnold wrote that art and culture contained the best which had been thought and said about the human condition and experience. St. Augustine wrote that truth, wherever it is found, belongs to God. We also know from reading, say, Shakespeare or Dante, even reading Homer, if you have a knowledge of the classics, that so much of our great literature was dependent upon other source material. Homer drew from the now lost poems and songs of the Trojan War. Dante drew inspiration from the medieval troubadours of France. And Shakespeare could not have written his great plays without having read Plutarch. Thus, to have a deeper appreciation and understanding of the beauty of art and literature, of culture, we should also be familiar with the stories that inspired the stories that inspire us. So why should we read the great books? Why should we care about literature? First, the great books are simply part of our cultural inheritance. Our civilization has cultivated a place for great art, great books, and great literature, from the writings of Cicero and Virgil to more modern works from the likes of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. The repository of Western art and culture has so influenced the formation of our artistic and cultural consciousness that to ignore it is to ignore an important root that has given rise to the greatest sculptures, paintings, and writings in the Western tradition. Furthermore, it is also because of what culture is truly about. As my former teacher, Sir Roger Scruton, said, culture is the emotional and ethical wisdom and knowledge given to us by art, given to us through poetry, literature, music, aesthetics, spiritual practices and traditions, etc. Emotional and ethical knowledge and wisdom is what great literature and the great books wrestle with. For that is what we are as human beings, creatures of love, and love is fundamentally about ethics. This is one of the most important things that the teaching of great books, especially in a humanities setting, is all about. We read great books because they teach us about love. Love in all the manifold and diverse ways that it manifests itself in our world and in our lives. Let us now look at just a few of the great books we ought to be familiar with. Great books that have inspired our forefathers to gaze upon the heavens and venture across stormy seas to build a civilization of the heart, a heart we know to be good and noble, despite what its many critics in today's age say. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey are foundational texts for the entire artistic and cultural tradition of the West. They influence the greatest Roman poet Virgil and his composition of the Aeneid. While the Aeneid originally held pride of place in the West, the recovery of Homer and the Philhellenism that swept the West in the 19th century brought Homer back to its rightful place of prominence. The Iliad as we know, is the story of divine wrath, the Mene of Achilles. Spurned by Agamemnon's theft of his war booty, Briseis, Achilles sulks in his tent as his comrades die at the hands of a resurgent Trojan foe. After the death of Patroclus, Achilles curses Priam and his sons, vowing to wipe out their seed from the face of the earth. He mercilessly slays Lycoon and Hector. Then, in the most sublime moment of the poem, Priam courageously ventures into the tent of Achilles to beg the return of the body of his beloved son. In the tent of Achilles, the rageful killer has every opportunity to make true his vow that he has just said, and that listeners of the poem being sung and readers of the poem would have just heard, to kill Priam and wipe out his seed from the earth, to destroy forever the existence of his avowed enemy. Instead, the love that a father expresses for his son breaks Achilles' heart of stone. The two weep together in each other's arms as they embrace each other in friendship and forgiveness. Achilles, in a moment of forgiveness, disavows his desire and his vow to kill Priam and returns the body of Hector to his father. Homer ends the Iliad, an epic of war, rape, and brutality, on a note of peace. Homer's crafting hand, it should be noted, tells us the true impetus of the Iliad. Homer knew the existing stories of the Trojan War and the now lost poems and epics that sing of the Trojan horse, the burning of Troy, the killing of Priam, and the death of Achilles. But that is not how Homer ends his story, his poem, and his song. Homer ends it on that note of peace, that love through forgiveness can bring peace to a shattered world. That is, of course, how the Iliad ends, even if we, like the audience in Homer's time, know how the rest of the story unfolds. And yet again, we must recognize that Homer didn't conclude the Iliad with the sack and burning of Troy. He ended it on the single moment of forgiveness which brought peace to a war-torn world, which brought avowed enemies together, not in combat, but ultimately in friendship and forgiveness. What is the meaning of the Iliad? Hatred, animosity, and war is not the end, and in fact, that is not what heroism is about. Instead, true heroism is found in forgiving an enemy, in bestowing peace to a people that you hate. If we accept the continuity of the Iliad and the Odyssey, which we should on grounds of their synthetic narrative, we realize that the Trojan War began with marital infidelity and only ends because of marital fidelity. The infidelity of Helen and her elopement with Paris bring the world to war and gather all the heroes of the two epics. The Odyssey deals with the final journey, as we know, of Odysseus, away from Troy and his captivity at the hands of Circe and Calypso, to his beloved wife Penelope on his homeland of Ithaca. It is easy to criticize Odysseus for his supposed infidelity. This misses the mark, as the likes of Eva Braun, the great classicist and educator, have shown in her many writings and her books on Homer's great classic. Odysseus, despite his time with Circe and Calypso, renounces the immortal pleasure of the divines. He realizes he really is a slave of their passions by remaining with them. He rejects the illusory unreality of their false promises. The heart of Penelope, the flesh of Telemachus, his son, and the soil of Ithaca, not the immortal pleasures of the divines, calls his soul home. When Odysseus journeys to the underworld and meets the heroes of the Trojan War, Homer reveals to us the revelatory message of the poem, the importance of the family. Telemachus has been out searching for his father, and he has always been motivated by the spirit of love, the love of his father and the love of his mother, to restore their family in the face of those bandits and brigands who want to ruin it and seize the kingdom. Penelope has remained true to Odysseus despite all the pressures placed on her as a woman and queen. And so in the underworld, Odysseus meets Agamemnon and Achilles, who both speak of the eternal importance of family life. Agamemnon bemoans how he was betrayed by his wife and her lover when he should have finally had a happy rest upon his arrival at home after a long absence. Despite this bemoaning of betrayal and his own murder, Agamemnon praises Penelope's love for Odysseus. Likewise, Achilles rebuffs the praises of war showered on him by Odysseus, more evidence as to why the Iliad is not a celebration of war. Achilles only asks for knowledge about his son and says that he would rather be a poor tenant farmer with his family than master of the underworld. As he so brilliantly and hauntingly says, "I'd rather slave on earth for another man, some dirt poor tenant farmer who scrapes to keep alive, than rule down here over all the breathless dead. But come, tell me the news about my gallant son." The heroes of the Iliad, the heroes of the Trojan War, do not want to be remembered for their warlike and martial virtue, their killing and their slaughter of enemies. Instead, Agamemnon praises the love of Penelope for Odysseus, and Achilles says that he would sacrifice everything, he would give up being the world's greatest warrior if he could just spend time with his son. So Odysseus completes the journey of return to his family and is reunited with Penelope and Telemachus. With the divine intervention of Athena, peace is restored to Ithaca and to Odysseus and his family. The war began with marital infidelity. It finally ends in peace for our Homeric heroes because of marital fidelity. The fidelity, the faithfulness of Penelope and Odysseus, of Telemachus for his family, for Odysseus and his family. What the Odyssey teaches is that the supreme love that brings peace and happiness to the world is the love we find in the family. Dante's Divine Comedy is the great Christian epic. Though most are familiar with the Inferno, it is imperative that Christians, and frankly all people, read all three books together to get the fullest appreciation of the work and Dante's entire message. The course of the Divine Comedy is a training and education in love for the poet Dante. Having wandered from the straight and true, Dante is guided through hell by the Roman poet Virgil. Over the course of the Inferno, Dante and Virgil set aside their petty differences and come to love each other through mutual dependence and, upon the Inferno's end, forgiveness. In a loveless place, which is what hell is, trust, friendship, leading to forgiveness is the only light that emanates in this bleak and dark world. Furthermore, Dante learns mercy through his meeting with the various sinners he encounters. Dante learns to take pity even upon the sinners in hell. Dante, therefore, begins to learn about the love that saves souls, the love that requires forgiveness, the love that requires pity and mercy, even for those we despise. Before proceeding into the final circle of hell, Virgil rebukes Dante for his dallying. Dante asks for forgiveness. Virgil realizes he has wronged Dante. The two share here the only moment of forgiveness in the entirety of the poem, which permits them to proceed into the final lair of the beast and out to the slopes of Mount Purgatory to proceed on their journey to heaven. Without forgiveness, you cannot escape hell. If, in the Inferno, Dante learned the virtues of love in the form of trust, mercy, pity, and forgiveness, Purgatorio is where he learns to direct these virtues to lofty ends, principally through conversation and friendship with the poets who all discuss the nature of love itself. When Dante and Virgil encounter that other great Roman poet, Statius, the three form an impromptu trinity, a relation of love bound together in loving conversation and friendship, just as Augustine described the Trinity as reflecting in his magnificent work De Trinitate. Learning to order his love properly, and through the love that only relationship and friendship bring, Dante finally meets Beatrice and is ushered into the starry lights of heaven. So in the Inferno, Dante learns the virtue of love in mercy, in compassion, in pity, and forgiveness. In Purgatorio, in the company of friendship, he and the other poets begin to discuss the nature of love itself, and through that directing the virtues of love to questioning the nature of love itself, and in learning the nature of love itself, Dante is brought into the realm of love itself. In heaven, however, Dante's education in love still proceeds. Beatrice reminds Dante regularly that he should keep his eye on the true prize, the true author of love, God. Poetry is a beautiful thing. Poetry can inspire love. Friendship can inspire love. Poetry and friendship can bring happiness. That is what Dante learns in Purgatorio. But it is in Paradiso that Dante learns that everything is good and beautiful and loving because it has the author who is beauty, goodness, and love itself, God. God finally looms large in the final section of the Divine Comedy as the ultimate destination of human love, because all mercy, all forgiveness, all compassion, all mercy, all pity, all friendship, all beauty, all goodness, all justice, everything we care about in life matters to God. And it is through God that all of these beautiful and wonderful and good things are made whole. The virtues of love Dante learned in hell, the order and directionality, the questioning and the conversations concerning the nature of love he learned in Purgatory, meet their ultimate fruition in heaven, as Dante is guided by Beatrice and takes his seat with the choir of angels and saints to sing praises to God forever, and so to behold the love that moves the sun and the other stars. Love itself is the meaning and purpose of existence. Forgiveness is all about love. Friendship is all about love. Beauty is all about love. And love comes from God. The best which has been thought and said in our artistic tradition, in the great books and in the literature that we have and read, teaches us about love. the love found in forgiveness, the love found in family, and the love that comes from God, the supreme and ultimate source for all other forms of love, are contained so beautifully and communicated so eloquently and so powerfully in the great works of the Western tradition. From Homer and Dante to Shakespeare, Austen, and Dickens, the great books move us to the real spirit of charity, that ethical and emotional wisdom and knowledge of seeing another person and loving and caring for them. That is why reading the great books matter. That is why great art and great literature matter. Spending time with the great books will reignite the heart's passion for beauty, goodness, and truth, and ultimately for love itself. It will also reveal all the counterfeit loves masquerading as art, which is far from the best which has been thought and said, and far removed from the love that moves the sun and the other stars. The great books, it is in the great books that we may discover and reawaken our hearts for compassion, mercy, emotional goodness, and ethical wisdom. It is through the great books that the meaning of life is revealed to us, and in that revelation we may have the courage to ascend to the heavens once more, for the health of our civilization, and indeed the health of our souls, the kindness and compassion that others depend on. Consider how even aesthetics and art communicate this reality. When art is inviting, when art brings us into a relationship with it, when the beautiful buildings and the places we live give us a sense of serenity and peace and want us to lead us to enter into a relationship with them, we realize that we live in an interconnected world, a world calling us to beauty and love. There is nothing more important than learning the emotional and ethical wisdom and knowledge contained in the great books.